love all types of music. Dave Matthews is just my favorite. I've
Oh,
seen them about 150 times in my life.
wow. I think that blows any super fan out of the water.
Yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing.
It's a thing. Welcome back to Beyond the Bar podcast. I'm your host, Anisa Tova, and today it is my pleasure to be joined by Alison Epilone. She's a dynamo. She's a legal trailblazer, also a friend. And she's a standout partner at a law firm, Mantel McDonough Riso, LLP. She's handled complicated, really high net worth divorce cases. Anything and everything. She served as a principal law clerk. She taught as an adjunct professor. She's a mom of twins, a city commuter, New York City commuter. So she commutes between Long Island and New York City, and that's a long commute. And I'm super excited to dive into her story and to get to know her even better. Allie, I'm so glad to have you. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Denisa. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, really, 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 really pleasure. And I am interested in human stories, as you know. So taking it to the beginning, what first triggered your interest in the law? When did you first start noticing, hey, I might be interested in a legal career?
It came on a little later. I know a lot of people say they've known right away. I think I was probably in high school. Before that, I was actually a competitive horseback rider, and I wanted to be a veterinarian. And then I quickly learned that science is not my thing. So I made the transition and decided, my parents would tell you I argue well and debate well and talked myself out of a lot of things over the years. So I made the decision to go into law, and I did do that I made that decision in high school, I'd say, and then went to Stony Brook, and it's all went from there.
Wow. So were you competing in horseback riding, actually?
Yeah, yeah. So I competed in horseback riding. I rode horses for, I'd say, about 8 or 9 years. And I competed in the Hampton Classic. I won a division in my Hampton class in the Hampton Classic. That's one thing people don't know about me at all. But by high school, as I started to get older, I decided, it wasn't really for me anymore. It's very time consuming. So I stopped doing it, unfortunately. I miss it, but it was a great experience in my life.
Do you still ride?
And I don't. I don't. I wish
Yeah.
I did.
Well, maybe
Maybe.
back to it. Yeah, it doesn't have to
Maybe.
be competitive, right? But just
No.
yeah,
No. It's a very time consuming thing.
yeah. I have so much respect for horses, but I'm a little afraid. It's their size. It's you know what it is? I think it's a respect. But there's something extremely calming. I remember, when I was younger, I dealt with lots of trauma and different issues. And one therapist recommended like what is it called? Um,
Equine therapy.
thank you, equine
Yeah.
therapy. And as far as I got was just to be sort of near horses. And this was a long time ago. And it really they could almost pick up your energy. You would know more about that, but it was
They
something
do.
very grounding and calming.
Yeah, they do. And when I'm sure they still do this. They worked with handicapped children at the barn I used to ride at, and it was truly amazing to watch.
Wow. So, so you got into the law, and so how did you end up in a family law? Because that's very different than corporate law. You're dealing with
Yeah.
children, human emotions. How did you get into it?
So it was kind of a progression. I knew I wanted to do family law, but I think when I first started, well, I guess in college and then first started law school, I didn't really know what that meant. And originally, I was interested in working with JDs or juvenile delinquents. And before I interviewed for private law firms, I actually interviewed with New York Corporation Counsel, which does JD work. But I then ended up going into private practice, and I knew I wanted to help people. So that's really why I went into this area. And it's not boring. And I knew if I did anything else, I'd probably be bored. But this area of the law is not boring at all.
No, so many layers. So you went into private practice and
Mhm.
then you became a law clerk for a judge? How?
I did. I did.
Wow.
So I spent about 10 years in private practice, and I was approached by Judge Joseph, who is the Suffolk County supervising judge of the matrimonial parts. I guess it was about 2018. She was looking for a new principal law clerk, and she asked me if I was interested, and I immediately was. For anybody who knows her, she is a fantastic, fantastic judge and person. And I knew at that point in my career, I said, I think, I'm like, I think this is the right move for me. And so I can see the other side of the bench, and start a career there, which transitioned back into private practice. But for the 3 years I was there, I had the most invaluable experience. And I think it's really made me a better lawyer today, because I know what the courts want and what they look for. So that helps me now as I'm back into private practice.
That is actually a great point. You're almost like a private judge, if you will, an arbiter in some of the cases where you can give both parties, or at least one of them. I know you can represent one, but it, an idea, arrange, how the courts would handle something to
Yeah.
hopefully bring them closer to resolution.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Every judge is different, obviously,
Right.
but I definitely feel that my experience with Judge Joseph was invaluable. It truly was.
So going from private practice to a principal law clerk, um, what would you say that really challenged you the most, where you felt like, ooh, I really have to grow through that?
Um, Originally, it's funny, it's just a little thing, is I didn't have to bill. So I wasn't when I first went, I'm thinking in point ones, which is how attorneys bill. And as I was writing decisions or conferencing cases, I was like looking to keep track of my time. So that was an adjustment. It's kind of a funny one. That, and then a transition to say being more of a, not being an advocate, so to speak. You have to be more of a neutral, and the writing tone as well. That took some time to transition from the persuasive writing from one client's point of view, to writing from the court. And Judge Joseph, really helped me with that as well. So that I think was probably a difficulty when I changed. Also, it was somewhat of a difficulty because I was the law clerk in the county that I primarily practiced in.
Wow.
So between colleagues, it changes your dynamic. So that was something to work through as well. And I think also for practitioners to work through. And I try not to do it now when friends or colleagues of mine go into these positions. Some people would try to like email or text, like, "Can I get an adjournment?" Things like that. But you can't be in that role anymore once you start working in that kind of position.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because
Mhm.
that I could see that happening. Yeah, you're one of us, and now you're
Mhm.
one of them, and it
Yep.
can go both ways, right? It's like, wait a second. Uh, yeah, that must have been internally, that must have been something to work through.
hmm And I came to a point where I did establish boundaries, and I said I can't do this. Write an email, copy your adversary, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, let's keep it nice and neutral. Yeah,
hmm
that's
hmm
yeah, that's actually that's an interesting perspective. And where does the professorship come in?
So I actually, almost immediately after me graduating, passing the bar, I was asked to tutor. And I tutored for the bar exam for quite some time, specifically focusing on writing for the bar exam. And then after doing that for a few years, I was about 5 years into my career. I was asked to be an adjunct and teach a course. It's like a supplemental course to another course at Toro Law Center, where I went to school, for writing specifically for the bar exam. And then I did that for several semesters. I was asked then to teach a first year class. It was called Foundations of Legal Foundations. So that was helping first year law students transition to from college student to law student and helping with legal writing. And then finally, the last class I taught was also a legal writing class for first year law students. So that was the last one I did.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I did it for about 7 years. The last time I did it, I was actually pregnant, and it was during the pandemic, so it was all virtual. But yeah, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work,
Yeah.
but fun.
Speaking of, it sounds like it, right? You would
Yeah,
not have done it if you didn't enjoy it.
yeah, it was fun. I liked it a lot.
Wow. So how do so you balancing, and you're a mom of twins, not just
I
one child.
am. No, I have twins. Yeah, they're 4 years old.
Now they're 4 years old.
Yes.
So how do you, obvious question, how do you balance it all? I mean, it's you're a commuter. You're a commuter. That's not easy.
Yeah. Yes, I
Right.
stay in the city a couple nights a week, but yes, I do commute.
And then twins, being a mom, legal career, back then, the professorship, how do you balance it?
So I have to say, I can say this now. I have help and I need help.
Mhm.
So it took a while to rely on other people to help me. And I had a real difficult time with that after I had them and went back to work, especially when I transitioned from the judge back into private practice. I struggled a lot. You try to be the best you can be on all fronts, be the best attorney, be the best mom, be the best partner. And it was a very challenging time for me. And it took about 18 months or to 2 years or so for me to really settle down and to at times wave the white flag and say, hey, I need help. That was a humbling thing for me, but also a great learning experience, to be able to also rely on somebody else. So I have a great partner. My children's dad is fantastic. He is a great dad, and he takes on a lot of the home duties, which is a help. And I have a nanny. She is also fantastic. She's been with me since the twins were 4 months old. So I have help. I have help. It's stressful. It's stressful to say the least, but we have our own defined roles now. I'll make appointments, but he'll take them there. Things like that. So we have now a well-oiled machine.
Yeah, I wonder why it's so difficult. And I don't know if it's especially women, not necessarily, but to ask for help.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's definitely a female thing as well. You don't want to say you can't do something. And a big challenge for me too is I had my twins later in life, so I lived a life just as me. And, I knew what I could do. And, then bringing the children into the world, that was hard. That was hard.
Yeah, I don't know if there's ever the right time to do it. It's almost like it's not the same as bringing home a puppy, but but it's like, it's another being that you become responsible for. And I
Mhm.
oftentimes say, so I had two children, and there's a difference between, how you raise the older one versus the younger one or the middle one. And it's almost like they become, and I don't want it to sound, they almost become like a practice ground for as you're evolving as a human being, right? Because
Mhm.
there's no parenting handbook. There is
Yeah, they
no
don't send you
guide
with a
how to
book.
do it. Yeah, yeah. It's like I've sort of observed myself, as I have done my own work, how I also progressed as a parent. And you know what? I've come to a realization. that it's best to be completely honest and not try to be perfect in their eyes. And it's like, hey, I screwed up. I'm sorry. You will always
Mm-hmm.
get a sorry from me. And
Mm-hmm.
always, you know, honesty, but just, yeah, not trying to be perfect at all costs.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is you don't have to be perfect. No parent is perfect. They don't send you home from the hospital with a book. They just give you these kids and they're like, see ya. Here
Yeah,
you go.
figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah, figure it
Yeah.
out. But I think, the fact that I have a support system, my parents are a really great support system for my kids and my family as well. So that's a help.
Yeah, you are, Al, you're so resilient. And, we do have something else in common, and, that's losing a loved one. Um, you've lost your brother.
I did. I did. I lost him, and it's actually on May 10th, 2018. So it'll be seventh anniversary. Am I counting right? Yeah, seventh anniversary in a few days.
How have you dealt with that?
Um, it's been it's been an interesting process. So my brother struggled with addiction and some mental health issues for a very long time. Struggled for about 14 years before he passed. And it was a very, very trying time, those 14 years on me and my family. I'm the only other child that they have. I'm the oldest. He was the youngest. And initially, when he passed, as being left as the only child, you don't really have a time to process or grieve because you really need to be more concerned about your parents at that point in time, and helping them get through losing a child. So it's I trying to think how to word this properly is at that time people approach you, of course, we're so sorry for your loss, but then the next question is, well, how are your parents doing? Nobody really asks you how you're doing.
Right.
So that's why the beginning of the grieving process,
Hmm.
a blur. And I had to be numb to it to make sure I was strong for my parents. And then as time went on, I then started to process and deal with my grief in my own way. And now, all of us, my parents, have really come to a point where we're at peace. For anybody who has a loved one struggling with addiction, a constant question that we had was, um, where is he? You always are, well, where is he? You're kind of always waiting for a call. And unfortunately, that call did come, but now we know where he is at night. And that it truly has brought peace to the family. And my mom is really the one who has said that, is they now know where he is. And he's no longer facing his demons, and living with those. And he left behind a beautiful son, who is now he'll be 7 in August. So we have that piece of him left with us as well.
Wow. What is your brother's name?
His name was Gregory.
Gregory.
Yeah. And so is his son, and so is my dad. That the
Really?
Italian, yeah, it's the Italian thing. My son's the same. My son's the third. My nephew is Gregory the third. My partner is Anthony Jr. So yeah, it's a whole thing.
Oh yeah, it is
Juniors,
all right.
juniors, seniors, juniors, and the thirds.
Yeah, it definitely touches me. And I know you and I spoke. Actually, I think the first time we met, we found out we had that in common. And Gregory actually passed around the same time, very close to, well, it was yeah, to Elias, my son,
Yes.
passing. And it's interesting what you just said. I never thought about it. So I have a daughter, Dominique, and she would always say, "Mom, I'm so sorry," and making sure that I was okay. She's in
Hmm.
a different stage. She's an adult, and with the job, and but I never quite thought about it. Of course, we would openly talk about it, and sometimes, you're sad, you're angry,
Hmm.
you want to laugh, just kind of like remembering him. But I never thought about what it's like from her perspective, other than, oh my gosh, she was lost, her brother who was 6 years older than her, and they would drive around and do stuff, and now she doesn't have that. But
Hmm.
beyond that. So that's interesting what you said. Yeah. Yeah. It's and it's the same path that he followed, addiction, after he left service. And it's same sort of feeling is we didn't know when the phone call would come, it came, and
Yep.
it's just that this emotional roller coaster, and then there's this feeling of like a relief that he doesn't suffer anymore and we know where he is. So it's just,
That's exactly right.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow.
I used to think people like it was a little callous to say it's a relief, but it's not. We are at peace with it.
Yeah, yeah. It's, you know what, and what I've also learned too is everybody grieves differently, and it can show up in so many different forms. And I would just say, talk about it, be open. He left behind a daughter, right? It's a beautiful granddaughter. She'll be 13. It's like,
Yeah.
you have to be, strong for them, and leave the lines of communication open, and every feeling is a valid feeling. And yeah.
Hmm.
Um, what do you think, if at all, going through that really just deep and intense experience, w- has it impacted you as a professional? And if so, in what way would you think?
I always try to keep my personal life and my personal beliefs separate from my cases and my clients. I don't really like to blur those lines. However, I do when I am dealing with a family or even a client who suffers from addiction. I think I bring a different level to it. Same thing with people suffering from mental illness. um, I I believe the compassion that comes with it is different because you approach someone or a family with addiction differently than you would, for example, approach someone who has cancer. They're both illnesses, but there's still a stigma attached to addiction. But I think the compassion is different, and the understanding and patience
Mm,
um, when you're dealing with that. I think that's different for me now.
understanding and patience. It's almost like you can lean into it
Hmm.
without, without crossing that boundary. But I
Hmm.
think it maybe be uncomfortable for many practitioners. It's like, okay, I'm going to sort of stay on a surface, but you're able to
Yep.
just kind of work through it and guide them to resolution despite of that
Yep.
is especially, yeah.
Yep. Very, very rarely will I share, the experience. My colleagues and my friends obviously know, but I will rarely share it with a client unless I need to help that person feel more comfortable. Because that's really what we're about too. We're not just attorneys at law; we're counselors at law too.
Yeah. Yeah, sure, throw that on.
Hmm.
I mean,
Hmm.
seriously. So, I mean,
Hmm.
you're so busy. What do you do? Now let me ask you actually this. If you had a day to yourself, just you, away from your phone, what would you do? Away from your phone.
Anything in the world? Can I put all things
Yeah,
in one day?
yeah.
All right. So let's see. I would. I would go to the gym. I love going to the gym. That's a really great outlet for me. It's a very personal thing. I just put my headphones in, put my music loud, and it's just me time. That I would probably get a facial and a massage. I like doing that. And if I really had to choose between my two kind of favorite things, I would probably pick going to a concert. And that is probably a Dave Matthews concert, which is also kind of my secret obsession.
I forgot about that. I'm glad you mentioned that. Let's talk about
Yes.
that. It's not just any, she's not just a fan. This goes deeper. Okay, please do
It
tell.
does.
You have to share that.
So I went to my first Dave Matthews Band concert when I was 12. My mom brought me, and they were a relatively new band at the time. And it was just this incredible, incredible experience, even for me as a preteen. And it's from there I was hooked. So as I got a little bit older, I then started to go to more and more concerts, when I was able to go with friends instead of my family. And it's funny, even for like my Sweet 16, I didn't want a party. I wanted a limo and 4 tickets to see Dave Matthews,
Wow.
which my parents did for me, but, instead of having one of those huge Sweet 16 parties. So I did that, and I just never stopped. Obviously slowed down a lot now. I'd say I used to go probably anywhere between 10 to 15 concerts a year. Now it depends on the year, but maybe five, I'd say, a year. And I travel to see them. And, I actually went to Mexico in January to see him, and it's him and just another individual, not the whole band.
Okay.
But yeah, it's something,
Wow.
for me, I love music. I love all types of music. Dave Matthews is just my favorite. It's just I get such a release and like a feeling of euphoria, and everything is like lifted off your shoulders when you go there. It's just happy, everybody's happy. Um, and just listening to the music and connecting with the music and not having to think about the stresses of work, or the stress of kids and things like that. And now my kids like them too, and they'll say, Dave Matthews. And it's funny,
Really?
there's a there's a symbol, and it's called a fire dancer. I actually have it on my cup here. And when my kids see that now, they're like, oh, Dave Matthews, and it just makes me proud.
That's funny. That's
But
four.
yeah. And
Wow.
then my daughter, when we get grown up, can we go to see Dave Matthews? I'm
Oh,
like, yes, you can go.
that is incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
was wondering. Yeah.
I'm sorry, go.
No, I
I've
was,
seen them about 150 times in my life.
wow. I think that blows any super fan out of the water.
It's a thing. It's a thing.
It's a thing. So there's so many questions, but I'll probably use two. What's the furthest, I mean, how far did you travel? What would be the furthest
Um,
place?
so I guess now it would be Mexico. Before I think I'm trying to think of geography wise. The before that, it
Like
was
internationally also?
I've never
Outside
I've never been to Europe. So they do European tours every couple of years. It's one thing, it's on my bucket list. But the other furthest I've been seeing them in Las Vegas and in Lake Tahoe. I'm actually seeing them in Lake Tahoe again in August. So that's probably the furthest apart from Mexico.
Wow. Um, have you ever met him?
No, I did. Not like a one-on-one, but in a intimate setting. I was trying to remember how old I was. Someone was asking me about it recently. I actually think I was a senior in high school. Um, but I won to see him on a radio station. I know people don't really listen to actual radio stations anymore. They were having a contest because he was playing this private show in Howard Stern's studio when Howard Stern was still on what was called K Rock. I think it
Yep.
might still be K Rock. So I answered a trivia question, and I won. I made remember, if you ever did it, you waited for the line to finally pick up after the busy signal. And then I answered the question, and me and my best friend went. And we saw him in this very, very intimate setting. He played a few songs, and we met him, like the collective, we met him. So while I never really shook his hand, that was the closest.
Is that on your bucket list to shake his hand?
It is.
Yeah.
I would like to
Yeah.
meet him. I
Yeah.
would. It's something too. My brother and I went to, my brother really liked music as well. He was more into the Dead and the Grateful Dead, but he and I went to a couple of Dave Matthews shows as well. So, I definitely like to meet him.
I'm gonna work on that. That's gonna become my next project. I need to make it happen. I have to make that connection happen.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's a passion. Um, what would be your advice to incoming attorneys? I'm really curious because you've lived, you've gained so many experiences. You have such a diverse background. You've seen many transitions, and what would you tell them?
You got to put in the time. And if you really want it, you need to be dedicated. I've heard a lot of young lawyers over the years say, I really want this. How did you do it? How did you become a partner? And how did you do certain things? I said, put in the time. It's long hours. It's long hours. It's not just about how many days you can work from home and how many days off you get. You don't get days off. We had a lot of firms now, we have the luxury of being able to work from home just from COVID. But that's, interviewing a couple people since COVID, that's one of the first things they ask. And it's a little bit of a turnoff for me, even though I have the luxury of working from home a couple days a week. But it's just, you have to just put in the time. I think maybe you and I spoke about this, or I spoke about it with someone else. I don't really love that term work-life balance.
Mm,
And I'm not saying, well, what's the phrase, live to work or work to live? I can't remember.
yeah.
I'm not saying that, but you have to be devoted. And the time you put in, it's recognized. It really is. I work with a couple of young associates now, and they're amazing. The time that they put in, I truly in my career, I've never really worked with associates that put in this much time.
Mhm.
But if you speak, my partner, Kevin, will say this is we're always available.
Mm,
And people really appreciate that. I know you have the other people say like, we can't always be available. We need some time. And don't get me wrong, we have time. But, when those people need you, you got to be there. Otherwise, they'll just find a different attorney who will be, and you'll lose that client, you'll lose your reputation. But the firm really has a reputation of being available, and the clients truly appreciate that. They really do. So that's really, I'd say, my biggest piece of advice is just the dedication. Do it. I know I'm plugging him a lot, but Kevin, I actually started my career with this firm. At the time it was called something different, but I started my career with Kevin McDonough and Alan Mantel. And, Kevin has really shaped me into
mm,
the lawyer that I am. And he remains now, even 17 years in, as my mentor. He is, his dedication, even now, in this profession, it's unwavering and pretty remarkable. And for me, that's how you become successful. I don't think without that, you really can. And you can still have a life. So it's
right,
very hard for me to
right.
say that. But I just don't like that phrase, work-life balance. You just got to do it. You just got to do it, and you'll be able to really reap the benefits of that soon, sooner than later. One of our associates, she's only 4 or 5 years out, and she's really made a name for herself. She's paving her way.
You have a great point. I mean, I subscribe to it. To me, there's a separation when you say work-life balance, because if you truly love what you do, it's part of you, it's extension of you. So then it's just
Yeah,
a matter of, how you still get to do the things you love, and you should be able to do the things you love. And so it's whatever's important to you. And I can observe that the kind of work that you do, that's a career, that's not a job. If you're looking
correct.
for a job and the work-life balance, as you say, the 8 to 5, well, good luck and go somewhere else. But this is
Hmm.
different. And I see that. I see that where somebody wants to clock out at 5, fine. But don't expect to be at a certain level, and you got to put
It's
in the
true.
reps, you got to ask the questions, and To me, it's 7 days a week. I'm in a creative mode because it fills me up. For you, it fills you up. So
Hmm.
it becomes part of who you are. Like many other identities, you don't quit being a parent. You don't walk
Right.
away from it,
Yeah,
right?
you don't get to press pause.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
I know you subscribe to that too. I remember when you and I first met, when I first started working with you, I would get emails from you at 5:30 in the morning.
yeah,
And you used to say, like, even you're like, if I'm on vacation, I'll wake up early. I know
yeah,
you like to go to the gym, you'll work out, you'll do some work. Like, that's how you make it. And it's truly, it's how you do it. It's how you do it. It's
yeah.
dedication.
Yeah, and when you said that when you interview somebody and they're asking about home versus going to the office work, I'm like, okay, that's a benefit, but you're not there yet, right? It's like
Hmm.
walking in with that question kind of almost, I mean, I'm tough. I mean, that would just sort of like my team is virtual, but I very, very carefully selected people who did not need to be micromanaged. And they're the kind
Hmm.
of people where, they're animals. Like this is what they need to thrive, to deliver what needs to be delivered, and they're fabulous. But if it's
Hmm.
somebody who needs to be in the box and supervised, that's just not a good fit. So it's whatever works for you,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. And, even if you have the luxury of working from home, there's sometimes, even if it's your work from home day, you got to be in the office.
Hmm.
It's just, yeah, you have to do it,
Yeah,
regardless if it's your work from home day or not.
that's right. Wow. Well, I could chat with you forever, and you'll be back. And I know I say that, but I know with some people, certainly with you, there will be to be continued, and I have something to work on. So you gave me an idea. But thank you so much for sharing your story, and it's just been such a pleasure.
Thank you. It was really great to be on. I was nervous and kind of putting it off because, we've talked about it in the past, but I'm really happy I did it. It's always great talking to you, Denisa.
Likewise, likewise. And for our viewers and listeners to learn more about Allie's and her services and how to get hold of her, check out her bio link and information in the show notes. And as always, subscribe to our Beyond the Bar podcast channel on YouTube. Follow us on social media channels. And until next time, stay curious and stay inspired.